Welcome back to the Seaboard Central, everyone, in part one in the Seaboard Central Locomotive Roster Series. In this series, I'm going to show how I came up with the Seaboard Central Locomotive Roster and why I chose the particular models that I did. So if this sounds interesting to you, keep watching. So without further ado, let's get started. Here's the Seaboard Central Railroad System map that depicts the trackage as of the year 2015, which is the year that I modeled. The railroad didn't start out with this much trackage though. It actually started out as a short line between Cartersville and Cedartown, Georgia, during the year 1990. This was former CSX trackage, and 2 units were purchased to operate the line. Later that same year, CSX put the line from Macon to Savannah up for sale, and Seaboard Central was the winning bidder. And to operate this line was going to require a whole lot more locomotives. So let's talk about the Seaboard Central roster. So here's the actual Seaboard Central all-time diesel locomotive roster as of May of 2015. And this depicts all the units that's ever operated over the Seaboard Central, including units that aren't modeled or units that are no longer on the roster. So as you can see, it's made up of quite of a diverse mix of locomotives, with the largest being the SD40-2s. All right, to make it easier to understand, I broke it down by their acquisition date. So here's the Seaboard Central locomotive roster by acquisition date. And you'll see in 1990, here are the first 2 locomotives that were purchased to operate on the Cartersville to CSX line. And then this next group of locomotives were purchased to operate over the Macon to Savannah line. Now you got to think about, in 1990, what the Seaboard Central would have been able to get their hands on. And for that matter, all the locomotives on Seaboard Central property were purchased from the used locomotive market. The Seaboard Central doesn't have the cash flow to purchase a brand new locomotive. And for me, that makes the Seaboard Central more realistic. So you have to think about what kind of units would be available in 1990 on the used locomotive market. And it would be a unit like a GP9, GP18, or GP20, the GP30s, and this GP39M, which is actually a rebuilt GP35. So in the year 1994, the Savannah State Docks, which is owned by the Georgia Port Authority, put their 23 miles of trackage up for sale. And the Seaboard Central was able to acquire this and provide services in the Port of Savannah. So to operate that portion of the railroad, the Seaboard Central ended up purchasing an SW1200 and an SW1500 in addition to what they already have. So that's where you see these 2 units being purchased in 1994. So business started picking up, and Seaboard Central is in need of some more locomotives. So 2 years later, 4 U-18Bs were offered by CSX up for sale. So they grabbed those, making the first GE units to enter the property. Then in the year 2000, the Norfolk Southern offered their Cedartown down to Sonoya line under a lease purchase agreement. And since the Seaboard Central already was operating the trackage between Cedartown and Cartersville, it made perfect sense to pick this portion of the line up. So to operate that line, included in the lease purchase agreement was a group of ex-Norfolk Southern high hood GP38 and GP38-2 units. So this is where you see these 4 units enter the property. Now these units were pretty much patched out for most of the time they've been on the Seaboard Central until just recently, where a few of them have been repainted to heritage units, and that's where you see these here. So in today's video, we're actually going to look at some of those units from the locomotive roster that are still operating as of 2015. So I hope you've enjoyed the Seaboard Central Locomotive roster part number 1, and if you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps that YouTube algorithm. Next week, we're going to talk about purchases in 2004, and it was a big one. So be sure to tune back in for that. So until next time, I'm Tim Garland. Thanks for watching the Seaboard Central, and happy model railroading, everyone.